Welcome back to Scooter Gang, everybody. I want to preface this video by saying that not only will you void your warranty by doing this, but if you do it wrong, you will potentially lead to a fire hazard or a short circuit. So attempt this at your own risk. I've skipped past the easier parts like removing the deck lid and taking out the battery. I'm assuming you know how to do that and unplug the battery. It's just better to work on all of this with nothing plugged in. Start by hand loosening these two screws I've been working on since this video started, and then taking them out with the drill. Now you're going to carefully pull off the side panel. It is made of plastic, be careful, and it is also stuck with adhesive on the top part of it. For my rear blinkers, I've chose these yellow LED strips, and I'm putting it up the footrest, one on each side, and they have one red and one white wire coming off of them. So as I turn the right or left on, one side of the footrest will light up. So for the rear LED strip, we're going to take the red and the black, and we're going to connect it to the red and the black on this. If you're new to this type of stuff, I would grab some of these helping hands is what they're called. They'll help you hold the wires while you're soldering. First thing you want to do is pot your wires, and so I just got my soldering iron hot and got a little bit of solder on the end, and now I'm dabbing that on each of the wires. And down on the back of the LED signal, we're going to add a little bit extra solder to give us an easier, bigger spot to connect to. Now we're going to connect our red wire to our red wire, so it's sitting just on top of it, just to the outside. And then we're going to slowly tap with our soldering iron to connect the two wires. Now we'll do the exact same with the black wire. The front turn signals are a little bit harder because I wanted to route the wires on the inside of the scooter and not on the outside. You could potentially solder them the exact same way we did on the back, and you would be able to route the wires on the outside, but I think it's a cleaner look if you add them in with the rest of the wires and have them go into the chassis. It's easy to unwrap that cable wrap and add it to that and bring it through the same hole. Here's the rear that we already have done. And the front is the exact same blinker, just flipped the other direction. The only problem with connecting into the same area on this is that you can't really route the wires through the small hole that already exists. So really we're going to find this wire farther back and splice into it at a different point that's already inside the scooter. So you'll see one of these on each side of the scooter. It's the LED controller wrapped up in the black, and it comes down with 4 wires, and it comes into this splitter and becomes 8 wires, and 4 of those wires go to each of our blinkers on each side. So those are the wires that we need to find and isolate. So the first step is going to be figuring out which of the 2 side blinkers, which of these 2 black wires is the one we want. And we want the front one. So we're going to very carefully sort of pull on them until you figure out which is which, because we want to isolate the front wire. So once you found it, you may want to mark it with a piece of tape like this. Now on this signal wire, you're going to find a red, a black, a yellow, and a white. And we are going to very carefully cut the red and the black and splice into them with our red and our black for our turn signal. Now that we know which wire we're going to isolate, we can put the side back on and close this back up. I would be extremely careful tightening these down, and I would recommend doing it by hand. The plastic on one of mine broke off because I tightened it too much, and I think it's just best to tighten these by hand and do not over tighten them. So back inside, we're going to start by cutting the black wire. This is very, very thin wire. Be careful that you do not cut something that you don't want to, and then extremely careful when you strip it because it's actually smaller than my stripper could handle. Do the same to both ends of the black wire that we just cut. Then we're going to pot this wire, so just basically heat it up and then melt a bunch of solder onto it so that it will easily attach to the other wires when we do the same with them. Just to make sure you know where we're at, these are the wires coming from the front blinkers. And so we're going to pot both the red and the black wire so that we're ready to attach them, and then we're going to attach the black wires first, all three of them. This is a little bit tricky, and I'll show you the two ways I tried to do it. Both ways ended up working, but I think that this way took a little bit more adjusting just to get everything together. So I'm going to start with the wire that is across from our big wire, and I'm going to attach that to the bottom. Now I ended up doing this with my left hand just to get the right camera angle, and it kind of messed it up a little bit, but I tried to attach the second wire more towards the middle, but I think when that heated it up, then the first wire attached kind of fell off. But now they both had some solder on it, and so I wanted to add a little bit more to the top and just give it a fresh spot to stick to. I also realized that I wanted to show you how these little shrink wraps work. You can cut them, and we're going to put a little piece on here. Everything's connected now. I'm just going to add a little bit more solder to give it a little bit more strength and thickness. This is very delicate, and as you can see, if you're not careful, it will move on you and you'll have to start over a little bit. But don't worry, you got this. Just be patient, be gentle, give it a couple tries, and you'll get it all connected eventually here. Took me about 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes total on my first connection. You really just want to get to the point where it's solid and it's not gonna, snap off. The last thing you want to do is have to come back in here because one of your solders broke. So I finally got the 3 wires together in a way that I'm happy. I'm going to very carefully slide the piece of shrink wrap over the connection, and then we're going to heat it just barely and shrink it. Then I'm going to very carefully take some tape, cut it down a little bit, and wrap it around the same area just to give it a second layer of protection. You need to make sure that everything is sturdy and nothing's going to pull on this, but also that no bare metal is showing. So now let's do the red wire. We're going to splice into the red that is right next to the black we just spliced into. I ended up potting this one a little bit more just to make sure it has plenty of space to connect the other 2 red wires. And like I said, I tried this one a little bit differently. I turned it the other way like this. Made it a bit easier because I could solder the first wire there, that red one, just to the very edge of it, and then I could have the whole front of the wire for the second red one. Once we have these 2 connected, we're going to use our helping hands to hold them steady while we put the third one in place. First, I'm going to add a little bit extra solder here just to shore this up. And a little bit more solder just to shore things up. On this side, I just used tape. I actually forgot to put the shrink wrap on it, but it's a good opportunity to show you if you don't want to use the shrink wrap, you can just use tape too. You want to wrap it around it extremely carefully. Make sure that all that metal is covered. I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for watching. There's still a bit left in the video, obviously, but if you think this is going to be helpful to somebody you know that has a Vsett or a similar scooter with turn signals already, then go ahead and send this to them. Hopefully they can do this themselves. More turn signals is never going to hurt. It's only going to help you be more visible and more safe. Let's add one more piece of tape all the way around both of our connections that we just soldered. Here's what it looks like when you're done, and you're obviously going to have to do this to the left side as well. I had already done that before I recorded this video just to make sure that I knew what I was showing you was correct. The final step, you're going to need to get some of this black sealant and put it around the holes where the wires go into the deck, all the holes that we mess with. So that's that main one, and then 2 on each side, both at the front and at the back. So now that it's all hooked up, let's check it out. Let's check it out in the day, and then we'll check it out in the night. Here's the right side, and here's in the dark. Soldering on extra turn signals like this should work on your Vsett 11 Plus, your Vsett 11 Plus Super, or your Vsett 10 Plus. I believe all three of those are going to use very similar circuitry, and you could do this in the same method for those scooters. I'm happy to help. If you have any questions, drop a comment. And as always, thanks for watching. Scooter Gang out.